Hello, everyone, and welcome to our supply chain webinar today, The Journey to Stable. My name is Sarah Galarza, and I'm the Assistant Director of Graduate Admission here at Elmhurst University. And I'm joined today by some expert faculty, Dr. Robbie Thomas, our Supply Chain Management Program Director, and two professors, Tim Engstrom, who is also the Senior Vice President at Ascendant Corporation, and Brian Anderson, the Head of Strategic Sourcing and Corporate Services at GoPuff. We're also joined today by Jim Fehring, our graduate admission counselor for the Supply Chain Management Program, who will be moderating our discussion today. Before we get started with our discussion, though, we have a short video that we'd like to share with you. Enjoy.
Look at this, sold out. Can you believe this stuff?
So they were supposed to deliver it in October.
This is going to be an update on the kettlebell shortage of 2020.
I just want my shoe. Give me my shoe, please.
Then it was supposed to be November. No. Then December.
Give me my PlayStation. Am I wrong for wanting this, bro? I mean, everything just sucks lately.
Take my money. Take my money. I don't want it. Give me my shoe.
Every time I check my email, it's stuck on this right here. I don't even know what that means.
Tonight, one word sums up the feeling along every line of the supply chain: frustration.
Well, the shortages and delays in the global supply chain threaten a total paralysis.
When the pandemic hit, businesses anticipated that the COVID recession was coming. They thought that demand was going to drop, but something funny happened. The opposite of what all of these businesses and economists predicted happened. Demand exploded. People bought things like crazy, and now supply chains are choking on that record demand. Everyone has had the experience of not being able to get something, and everyone has had the experience of paying more for something. Prior to the pandemic, most of us just took it for granted that we could get things ever faster. E-commerce made it seem like everything was right at our doorstep. But that obscures what was a 14,000-mile journey halfway around the world. It took months, and when you add up all the automation, all the algorithms, all of the hundreds of people who had to touch those goods or transport them in some way, it's in total one of the most complicated endeavors that human beings ever engage in, and yet it happens millions of times per day, and we take it for granted because all of that has been rolled behind this ultimate convenience of just one-click e-commerce shopping. But the pandemic showed us just how unsustainable and unrealistic that expectation is.
Hello, well, thank you for joining us and thank you for watching, and thanks, Sarah, for your introduction. My name is Jim Fehring again, and I work as the graduate admission counselor here at Elmhurst University for our supply chain management master's degree program. Thanks to the panelists for joining us as well. So I'm going to engage in a little bit of a discussion with them and ask them a few questions. As the video showed, if you guys remember, the supply chain was it was quite I don't know what the exact word would be, but the man
chaotic.
wanted his shoes, the other guy wanted his Nintendo. Things have improved, but I like to discuss further what's going on with the supply chain and how we can continue to keep goods rolling in our country, especially through a pandemic like we went through. If you guys want, you can unmute yourselves and answer or ask any questions that you might have. Feel free also to put them in the chat, but we can make this sort of like an open discussion going forward. So I'd like to start out with Brian, if I could. I was going to ask Brian a question. How has sourcing changed since COVID? And how has the geopolitical aspect of it changed? How's that changed sourcing for supply chains? And how do you see the advantages and disadvantages for these changes?
Yeah, no, so Jim, I appreciate that. Obviously good being here today at Elmhurst University talking about supply chain, of course. It's not hard to find articles to talk about, what change is going on. But if you look at it, even if I just pull up the Wall Street Journal today, nearshoring, automation, supplier diversification, and sustainability, all four of those are key inputs into what's happening today in supply chain. Just to talk a little bit about nearshoring, and this is, this is not a fad. This is what's going on. I think in the government level, they would call it friendshoring, right? If they're thinking about the geopolitical side of this, but really it's getting supply chains closer to where the customers are. If I take a little bit of, my history with Duracell, in repositioning supply chains, it was this idea, right, of thinking that North American sourcing is really from the Hudson Bay all the way down to the tip of Argentina and Chile, right? And European sourcing really is from Iceland to South Africa, and supplier diversification out of China. And that's how we thought about it. But I mean, if I was to look at Mattel, right, who's heavily sourced in China, they're moving to Mexico, so they're getting closer to their customers in North America, in the US. Apple diversifying out of China, going into India, and there's many other companies, right, that are thinking like this as well. A lot of this has to do with COVID, but I would tell you, to the other part of your question, a lot of this has to do with geopolitics. This idea of having single sources, predominantly in China, if we're thinking about, the US, is those days are really done. And this is going to continue to happen. It may mean that they stay in Asia, maybe India, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, depending on what it is, but really it's a move into Mexico, Central America, and South America, really, depending on what the material is and the manufacturing aspect or distribution. As far as, what I would say, this makes a lot of sense. Really one of the drawbacks is going to be cost. China has really had a stranglehold on, low cost country sourcing. This may change with the move, into nearshoring. But the one, I would say the better trade-off is mitigating risk. And again, you see this in COVID, but when you have, ships and stuff like that, like destroyers moving through the South China Sea, or the building up of, the islands and the Spratlys, or even issues with Taiwan, this is going to only continue between the US and China, and this rivalry will increase over time, not decrease over time necessarily. I would say those are the key aspects of it. I think nearshoring is an important facet of what's happening today in supply chains. If I was even to maybe pull a page out of Robbie's book when, I was in grad school, right? The idea of having, being close as you can to the demand signal when it happens is a good thing. And I think in nearshoring, it's the same thing as how can we get that supply chain as close as we can to our customers? Really the same concept, in this case, physical distribution versus a forecast.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was going to say, Tim, did you want to add?
Yeah, so just to add on to that, Brian, absolutely, all over it. But one of the things I saw from a sourcing perspective, and if I go back to, the definition of supply chain that we share here in the program, it's the efficient movement of goods and information from your supplier to your customer, and back. And one of the things that we really learned from the pandemic was the communication flow. There were a lot of gaps in that communication flow from, the purchaser to the supplier to their raw material. And you didn't really know where the breakdown was. And the communication, I think, during the pandemic and post the pandemic has been improved. And that is one of the areas that companies are working on to mitigate risk of the future, because there's always gyrations within the supply chain, but it's really that communication stream that I've seen a lot of companies really start to open up and share not only information, but collaboration of how can we be better together, and making sure that we have the goods where they need to be so our customers can go and, procure them and have them available for all of us to use.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Robbie, on that, but that was interesting when you said, Tim, because I was, it's as bad as the pandemic was and what was going on there, we learned some things from it, I suppose. So if something like this,
just adding to what both these gentlemen said, and thank you both for being here. what Brian said, shortening of supply chains, that's basically something that you can see happening already. So if you look at, European supply chains, for example, a lot of things are moving away from China, and Asia and things like that. And the old Soviet, countries, the ones like Bulgaria and Romania and things like that, these were basically on the other side of the wall at one time. You basically are seeing a lot more activity there where, the Western European supply chains basically are now, instead of, trying to get it from Asia, they're trying to get it from, places like, Bulgaria, Romania and things like that, where we never really thought of them as, part of a big supply chain. But that is definitely changing. Other countries like Turkey, Morocco, Portugal, you can see a lot of more, freight movement in these sort of places, which was, which is something quite new. So definitely, to me, when we say nearshoring and onshoring and things like that, obviously, like Brian said, the geopolitical part of it is a big part, right? The big reason that we're doing it. But there are a lot of other issues that we need to look at. One is, of course, transportation costs and labor costs. These were very cheap at one time. That's why, we went to China in the first place. That is not very true anymore. So now by nearshoring, what you're doing is, basically the transportation costs go, basically you get rid of it. Inventory, a lot of people don't think about inventory when you're looking at nearshoring. When you have, supply chains starting from Asia, the lead time is a lot longer. And your safety stock that you carry, which is a big chunk of the inventory that companies carry, that is, it correlates with the, the length of the lead time. By shortening that lead time, basically you're getting out of that risk where, you don't need to carry that much safety stock. So safety inventory obviously goes down. Similarly, facilities, transportation, all these things have effects. These are all affected by, the nearshoring part of it. So definitely the geopolitical part of it is there, but, the shortening of supply chains is more involved with the costs also.
Yeah. And Jim, maybe a new word to use in this instead of even nearshoring, as I used it, or even Robbie uses, this idea of regionalization.
Mm-hmm. Local networks.
Yeah. And I think, I agree with everything that Tim and Robbie had said. I think, this idea of how you can be as close as you can to your customer, to be as, not only for what inventory you may stock, but even being able to react to changes and how quickly do that. I think regionalization, allows that to happen more smoothly than, these elongated supply chains.
The funny thing about this is obviously like with nearshoring and things like that coming in, you guys probably know this better than me. China actually right now is investing a lot of money on the border, right across the border in Mexico.
Yep.
So they even have anticipated, this nearshoring thing coming in, and they don't want to lose the U.S. market. So you see that also happening.
Yeah, Hisense. Probably every TV made for every manufacturer.
Yeah, exactly.
Made from Hisense, and where they manufacture for the U.S. is on the Mexico border.
Mexico border. Same thing with shoes and apparel. All these industries basically they're buying a lot of real estate right across the border.
Yep.
Problem is people.
Yeah, thank you.
Labor.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I was going to say, so talking about labor, I wanted to ask, especially Tim and Brian with your companies, labor availability and labor shortage in our country seems to be an ongoing problem. And specifically with supply chain, how are your companies that you both are at, Ascendant, and working to address like our labor shortage issues?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. And I'll tell you, we had labor challenges before the pandemic. We had a lot of labor challenges during the pandemic, and they have continued on after the pandemic. And it's in different areas. There's more folks exiting the workforce than entering the workforce. And I would say it's in different areas. So from a manufacturer, warehouse, driver perspective, it's how do you attract those folks to come into, and one of the things that happened during the pandemic is all this on-demand type of staffing models. So everyone loves to do Uber Eats or, do GoPuff or, other types of on-demand types of things because it gives you great flexibility. And that's attractive to the younger generation. And with that on-demand staffing, you got traditional businesses that have set schedules. So there's a convergence of conflict within there. Plus, folks don't really want to work, in a warehouse on a third shift on weekends. So it's hard to get people into the organization. So, there's a couple things, that we're doing here at Ascendant that I think is, really been beneficial. First and foremost, we implemented a apprenticeship program. So we've partnered with a school in the Chicagoland market that is connected with Elmhurst to go and we'll fund folks that will go and get an apprenticeship, but they get an associate's in supply chain management. And that is for folks, because life happens, and that allows them to go and continue, but it gives them a career path into management positions. We have also really tapped into alternative hiring pools. And this is where we take and go after, the veterans population, our folks with disabilities, and folks with second chance opportunities. And we have really started to open that up across the country. And we're seeing really good success with those programs where we have now, locations where we struggle to find people. We now have a waiting list for people that want to join us. So it has really changed the dynamic. The onboarding process went from 92 days to 6 days, and the retention and the call-offs, they're now, those folks that we hire, their attendance, so perfect attendance is up over 80%. So that is having a dramatic impact to our staffing within our facilities. And then, from, a leadership perspective, that's also, folks are, Brian talked about nearshoring, right? Onshoring. There's more work coming back to the US. So there are more jobs and there's less people to fill that. So you got to be able to attract and retain your workforce. So we have, built programs like we have an Ascending Leader program here where it helps do development within the organization. But then we also have a great partnership with Elmhurst University for folks that are going to be our future leaders to go in and get their master's in supply chain. And they're going to learn expanded disciplines, and that puts them on a journey for future senior roles within the organization. Those things, and we fund that. So that what that does is it retains people, but it also, from outside, if someone wants to grow their career and they know somewhere where that they can go and learn and expand, it also is a way to attract future leaders within the organization. And that's really kind of, it's a multi-level type of approach to go and get folks to stay, but also folks that want to join you. And, one of the best things that happened out of the pandemic is supply chain became a household word.
Yeah.
It was on the nightly news,
Yeah.
and no one knew about it before that, like going supply chain, what do you do? And now everyone knows about it and they talk about it, which helps with saying, hey, there's a great career here. And I think that, is some of the things that we've been doing.
Yeah, I would say at the GoPuff side. So, again, our business model is this idea of last mile, and then this instantaneous delivery, if you will, right? Somewhere, short of 20 minutes, right? And being able to deliver the thing that the person ordered. When we look at our business, it's more of, I think going back to some maybe tried and true ways to look at what we want to be good at, what's a core competency, and then what we figure out we want to outsource, so, in our model, I would say that, again, last mile is something we want to control. We want to be excellent at that. We want to do that with, our small fulfillment centers, nestled around urban areas, college areas, those type of things. But when you go back a level to the distribution side of it, it may be working with people like Ascendant, right? on the DC side, right, to be able to store goods, that fulfill these, what we would call MFCs. So when we look at labor, right, we want to be able to, attract labor, toward the thing that we want to be good at, and we want to use outsourcing, I would say strategies on the things that, make sense, that don't belong kind of under our roof. And I think that's where, we've at least focused to be able to, I think help, how we think about labor. Jim, the other thing I would say too, and I don't know how Robbie and Tim think about this, but the US, really, at a government level, right, coordinated with the states, really should try to figure out immigration, because this is really the catalyst of our success, as far as labor pools, first generation workers coming in, and taking these jobs, that where you can make a good living, right? As Tim pointed out, right, supply chain is very popular, but whether it's transportation, warehousing, those are the things, right, and the people that you need in order to, to really kind of set the stage right for success, in what we do. And I think the more, if that can become clearer, I know for generations this is not, but I think if we did figure this out as a country, I think we would be even more formidable as a competitor on the world stage than we are now.
Brian, I'm glad you brought that up, because oftentimes I think, to myself, that, we probably don't have enough people in this country to support the type of consumption that we as a country do. All right. We basically want cheap things, we want lots of things. Is that right? And then, we obviously need labor for that. And one of the things that, Brian, I'm glad you brought this up again, is our immigration policies. For the last, let's say about, 8 to 9 years, there is pretty much nobody coming in. You need those people to fill up where we have gaps. So definitely, this is something, government level, as to what sort of immigration policies that they have. Because I know a lot of people who, have, paperwork, visas, whatever, not visas as yet, but it takes forever to get a visa nowadays if you're out of this country. There are lines that are 2 years long just to get a student visa, for example.
Right.
So these are things that, obviously, we need to see some change, a lot of government level changes that we need to see. Same thing with transportation and things like that. There are a lot of regulations that were put in which prevents people from working. There's a lot of other issues. And a lot of times I think, first of all, before even immigration, we need to start doing what we do better. Our ports, for example, it takes twice as long to unload a container than, something like China. There is no reason for, not to have better automation there. A lot of our infrastructure is quite antiquated and very labor intensive, so those are things that you can, relieve by, little more automation and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And like Tim had brought up, you brought up, Tim, about how the pandemic brought the supply chain, the vernacular of it, into everybody's household. Like people knew, oh, the supply chain. I mean, they're used to grabbing that bottle of ketchup off the shelf at Jewel and bringing it home. But now they really knew, what goes on with that and, the problems that can arise. Speaking of that, like Robbie, in your class and in the program, what do you teach as far as some of the curriculum as far as what your students come out when they graduate working in the supply chain industry?
How much time do we have? All right, I'll be a bit brief here. Okay, so the theme today for our webinar is, this journey to stable. And in my head, this journey never ends. It's basically you have periods of stability, then you basically have some sort of a disruption. And then that disruption obviously redefines what stable is. And then you basically redirect your journey to some other place. Now, just to give you a little background in terms of supply chains, during a relatively stable times, most companies, what they're looking at is what we call economic supply chains or efficient supply chains. The main objective in these supply chains is to be basically to minimize cost and get the goods to your customer at the cheapest possible price, right? One of the problems with economic supply chains is it doesn't deal with disruptions very well. So long as things are stable, you can basically keep it more and more lean, keep costs out of the place. It goes well. But as soon as a disruption happens, these economic supply chains actually are very rigid. They cannot change quickly to react to changes, disruptions. So if you look at the type of supply chains as a spectrum, economic supply chains will be at one end. And at the other end is what we call, used to be called flexible supply chains or responsive supply chains. I understand, the latest word the people are using for it is resilient supply chains. Now, these supply chains basically are obviously more expensive. Cost is not an issue there. Response is the issue. So what you will see is, a lot of these responsive supply chains, basically, they have the capability of mitigating, first of all, any disruptions. And if you can't mitigate it, when disruptions happen, you basically can minimize the effect on it. So these are two ends of supply chains that we're looking at. Most companies are, somewhere in the middle, right? So if you look at economic supply chains, think Walmart, okay? Everyday low price. That's basically the type of supply chains they look at. At the same time, on the other end, if you look at Saks Fifth Avenue, for example, it's more of a responsive supply chain. Whatever the demand is, they basically make sure that, it is theirs because the margins are very high also. So in terms of these supply chains, so there is that spectrum. And what you will see is irrespective of, where on the spectrum your company is, there are certain practices and processes that are common to all. Your strategies and the tactics might change, might be different because, these are two different objectives on two ends of the spectrum. But what we try to do here is basically get people to understand, students to understand that there are certain steps that, you need to take, which are common to all, even like I said, even if the strategies and tactics differ. So first of all, you basically need to anticipate what the market is going to do, anticipate what the demand is. You need a target to, shoot for. Then basically you are looking at, how do I best supply this demand? Now, that might sound very simple, but, actually it's a very complex sort of issue there. But first of all, you need to know how your network is going to be. Where are your facilities? How big are the facilities? Which facility serves which other facility. So this is, a lot of the nearshoring and all is networks being changed. On top of that, we have inventory, which is basically a huge cost in the supply chain. What are the type of inventory policies that you do based on, whether you're on this end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum, that changes, right? Transportation networks, these are also another big chunk of change that, for every supply chain dollar that transportation takes up. Sourcing, which is Brian's area, how do you best source? What are the different areas that you can source in? Are you going to be sourcing, the way we are doing it, where it's all coming from one place? Or there are these new terminologies that people are using, China plus one, for example. So China is not going to go away, right? That is it's not easy to undo something that you're building for the last 20 years. So now basically you're looking at China plus one. For example, what Tim just said about Apple, or did Brian say that about Apple in India? So it's China and India. So if something goes wrong here, you have the other thing there. Then similarly, your IT infrastructure, your pricing is obviously very important because everything in a supply chain is cost. The only time you have revenue is at the end when you sell it, and what price you sell it at basically will dictate what sort of revenue you're looking at. In addition to that, of course, once you have these supply chain supply plans, how do you implement it? And once you implement it, how do you measure it? What sort of metrics and KPIs do you use? And then, of course, the feedback loop in terms of, what do you change? So what we do with our curriculum is, first of all, it's a very uniquely designed curriculum. It's not like most other places, our competitors, where it's basically bolted onto the MBA classes. You do certain number of core classes, and then they have some classes made up for supply chain. Our curriculum is laser focused on supply chain issues. So if we have a marketing class, for example, it's marketing in the supply chain. So we're looking at not just marketing, but how does it affect supply chains. So we are a very laser focused program that way, very laser focused on the supply chain. So in a lot of ways, what we do is, introduce students to the latest theories and methodologies that are there. What are the latest supply chain thinking? We provide them with a lot of, technology-based, data-driven tools that you use to plan supply chains. Planning, by the way, is the key thing. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it's stable or whether the disruptions. If you plan ahead, you can actually take care of things. So that is one of the main things that we try and teach them. And then, of course, we have to, make people understand that, we have these various different functional areas like marketing and finance and these sort of things. And supply chain, what we do is cut across in processes. Okay, so for example, how do you fulfill somebody's demand? It basically it's not one end of the supply chain, it's everybody backward in the supply chain is involved in fulfilling that particular demand. So the idea is to make sure that people understand how each of these functional areas has a role in supply chain, and how do you really collaborate between these functional areas to have a efficient supply chain there. Now, one of the things, of course, we are very thankful for is our corporate partners here, and Brian and Tim are, prime examples, very proud products of our program. Proud meaning I'm sure they are proud, but we are more proud than that, these guys actually are products from our program. So we have a lot of feedback. We have a lot of discussions with these guys, not just Tim and Brian. There are, people who teach in the IT and e-commerce area, especially where change is constantly happening. So every year we do, have a brainstorming session to see, okay, how do we change the curriculum to reflect what is happening today? So these are some of the things that we do, and we basically try and get students to get a good grasp of it. And one of the main things, obviously, is the hands-on experience that they do. At the end of the program, the whole of the second year, actually, they go into companies, take up a supply chain problem that the company has, and we work the whole of the second year actually solving that. Both Brian and Tim have done, when they were students, there were some fantastic projects that they did. And, a lot of the students, cohorts that have come after that, these guys are the benchmarks for them. So right now, for example, we are doing a project with Edward Don and Company. It's basically redesigning their supply chain network. They want to add a new facility. We're trying to see, where that facility should be. So various factors, including costs. This problem has 10,203 variables. 10,203. Your regular Excel that we all have on our desks do not take more than 199 variables. So, we use specialized software for this to solve these sort of problems. So there's a lot of that type of planning tools, what is current state of affairs. These are things that, we emphasize in the program.
Yeah, thank you.
Both Tim and Brian teach in the program, so they can definitely
you might add maybe a couple things, and then I know you'll add too. But I agree with everything Robbie said. I think in our program, as Robbie's talking about those variables and stuff like that, you realize he probably should have been building rockets, but we were fortunate enough to have him, come and start this program at Elmhurst. But, I think there's a couple of things that come out of it, is that, imagine, Jim, as you were talking about, or we saw in the video, you have a practical problem about the ketchup bottle, right? The good thing now is that everybody had those practical problems during COVID. And during this program, you take that practical problem, and then you come up with theoretical, problems and solutions around that to eventually have a practical solution. And that's what the curriculum takes you through. We have the opportunity, not only, I think, to, learn about finance, learn about e-commerce, learn about researching, learn about quality systems, learn about manufacturing decisions and inventory and planning. But it's really taking a practical problem, creating a theoretical solution and then, solving that with solving that with a practical solution. And I think that's what, every one of the students can experience. I think there's a lot of other soft things that come with it that are not so soft. One is that, the group dynamics and working with a group throughout the 2 years is invaluable. These are people, that you stay close with, I would tell you, for your entire life as you finish this program up. There's no two ways about that. Even when I graduated in 2007, I still talk to, my cohort teammates, right? Even after all these years. The professors, obviously Robbie's at the pinnacle of this, and that's not blowing smoke at him. He is. But we have a lot of very good professors with a lot of great experience. Tim Engstrom obviously is one of it. It's a very big catalyst for this program as well. But there's other ones, right? Deanna, so on and so forth, right? We have a lot, and they come with a lot of different, diverse views of supply chain and great expertise. And then, I don't want to minimize this capstone project, right? I'm sure Tim would say the same thing. We always do compare ourselves and the projects we did against the cohorts that go through. And I think, even though Tim and I, our personalities are different, right? We're all still doing the same thing of, judging, helping, coaching, in order to have that level of perfection, and success, right? That we had in the program when we went through as students. And I think that's also a very important factor of this. In the university, I will tell you, and granted, we have competitors just like everybody else, but those are clear differentiators between that capstone program and the other things that you do in this program, that do set us apart and do make us successful. And I, like I said, I think anybody going through the program, if you want to be able to be an expert, in supply chain, this is the place that you want to be, and maybe lastly, and I know this is true of Robbie and Tim, and Tim and I are examples of this. Robbie does not lose contact with his students. I've known the man now since 2005, right? So I don't know how many years that is now, Robbie, right? 18 years. So, I think one of the things that I think we pride ourselves on is that, we don't lose touch with our students, no matter where they end up, no matter what help they need, even at this level in their education, as they go on to do great things in their career, we stay in touch. So
that's I was going to say, it's one of the great benefits of a smaller school is, that personalized attention you get from your professors. And as you mentioned, you go through as a cohort, and just the fact that you guys have stayed in touch for that long, it's really a benefit of our program and like school.
No, and there's a lot of it is, thanks to people like Tim and Brian, where they have, gone out of their way to make sure that, there are venues where people alumni from the program keeps in touch. For example, Tim has our supply chain professionals group in LinkedIn, where we have over 500 people and about 400 of them are our alumni. So if I want to get in touch with anybody, all I need to do is, go to Tim's supply chain professionals group, and I know where they are. So they can run, but they can't hide.
I wanted to make sure we left a little bit of time. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody out there? Anything that we discussed or anything pertaining to supply chain? Or
Feel free to place your questions in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute
Or you
yourself,
can
that would be
unmute,
great too.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself and ask. By the way, before we go to the next question, shout out to Stephanie, Hector, Tanushka, Ben, a lot of alumni and students in the group. Thank you for coming. I can't see everybody. Okay, if I missed anybody, sorry.
But Robbie, we're always dealing with Hector's, love of LB and having to compare that and contrast that against.
Yeah, Hector will change his mind after we go through us.
Yeah, Robbie, I think you're right.
We have Stephanie here. Stephanie.
Yeah, Stephanie too. Yeah.
Any questions out there for the panel? Okay, we can also talk just before we wrap up. So Tim, you mentioned some of the things that we've learned. One of the big things was communication. But going forward, do we anticipate the supply chain to, keep running smoother as we go forward?
Yeah, so a traditional, as we think about journey the stable or journey the normal, right? In a normal environment and supply chain, you have 80% of it flows really, really good, and there's 20% that's chaotic. During the pandemic, that flipped. You had 20% that was stable and 80% that was chaotic. And I would say we're getting back to the normal 80-20 type of rule. And there still is disruption. There's always going to be disruption. Robbie always talks about the bullwhip effect. And you'll always continue to see that, and we experienced panic buying during the pandemic. You'll still see that when there's shortages on components where they'll have panic buyings, just not to the magnitude that we saw. So I think, as I mentioned, the communication was key to keep the inventory and the goods flowing during the pandemic. I have, absolutely that has improved post-pandemic. We have seen companies that now they're looking for that, continuity plans and the resilient supply chain. They know that it's not just one function. You have to communicate across the functions, not only within your organization, but outside your organization for your inputs and your outputs. And it's hard work, right? Sharing information, because everyone's always busy trying to survive the day, and able, to go and make sure that you're doing that outside of your own organization requires work to do that. But if you don't do that, and when in a time of need, that's when things can really break down. If you put the work in now, and when those things happen, it's an easier and quicker resolution, and you reduce a lot of noise and unnecessary workload to do that. So it's, I do think more and more, companies, they're learning how to do this. It's like working in, with Brian talked about the group and, the cohort groups and, working through that as a project. Those are skill sets that you carry into your career, and that is used exponentially when you're trying to make your supply chains much more efficient. And I would say that's a component companies are working through.
Thank you for that, Tim. Any final thoughts, Dr. Robbie and Brian, before we wrap up here? Oh, we have a question there.
Yep.
We do. I was going to say we have a question in the chat as well.
Okay.
So this is a question in regards to the program. What is the possibility of being accepted into the program when you're a current student at another school? It's a very interesting field, and they're excited to learn a little bit more. And actually, we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. And maybe you could add on to that, Jim, about students who are interested in applying, kind of the steps in the process and where they should be at with their undergraduate degree.
Yeah, just really quick. So that would be the same process. You would submit an application online, our free application. And then we would take a look at the transcripts from the program and school that you're at, and all of your other admission required materials. And then we would make a decision on admission for you within a week or so. We take up to 2 courses as transfer credit, and that would be up to Dr. Robbie. He would take a look at your transcripts and see if we would take any classes coming in as transfer credit. So the first step would be to apply. And then once you apply, I would be in contact with you. What was the other? I think someone else had a question.
I think someone had their hand up.
Hand raised?
I don't know if their hand is still up. Yeah, let's see. Yes, Fernandez, Jonathan.
Or Stephanie?
Yeah, Stephanie.
I dropped my question into the chat. This is Stephanie.
Oh, there we go. I got it. I see it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about inventory levels and carrying costs. Nearshoring helps reduce safety stock, but we've also learned that we still might need to carry a bit more to be prepared for the next big disruption. What do we need to consider with economic slowdown in the U.S.?
In terms of the safety stock.
Thank you. Yeah.
I didn't quite get the question. Can you repeat the question?
Right.
Yeah.
So first, can I say thank you, though? Thank you,
Yeah.
Tim. Thank you, Dr. Robbie. Thank you, Brian. This is awesome. I feel like I'm right back at the great program that I was in a few years ago and missing it. Maybe you guys will let me come back and do it a second time, huh?
Why not? We'll give you a discount.
Oh, there we go. So my question is regarding safety stock and sort of inventory levels. And, you know, earlier in the conversation, we talked about nearshoring, enabling a lot of companies to reduce the amount of safety stock they carry because, you know, obviously a little bit less risk there. But we know that it's just a matter of time before the next big disruption hits us. So, you know, that makes me want to carry more safety stock just in case. But now at the same time, we're looking at all of this economic slowdown. And, you know, what part, you know, how do we consider the economic slowdown when we're looking at inventory levels and safety stock?
I could go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Timmy.
So, because we're doing this. So, one of the things, and this is the benefit of the communication and sharing information and being transparent in your extended supply chain, is that you can work through and identify what are the things that best flow the product from your suppliers into you to make sure you have inventory. Carrying extra inventory is actually very costly. And it impacts your working capital, your overall cash flow. So you want to be able to have the right amount of safety stock, but it's really about inventory turns. And the best way to manage those inventory turns is through that partnership and sharing of information and identifying what are the barriers that you can go and reduce to make sure that you have a more fluid flow of goods coming in. So you're not having extra safety stock that's clogging up, because that not only is it from holding inventory, you now need more space. The more space you need, you now need more workers because it's less efficient to operate. So it is a ripple effect across.
So
Yeah,
Stephanie, just to add to that, you know, a lot of times safety stock, the reason we carry safety stock is because of uncertainty, and that uncertainty can come from the demand side, and it also can come from the supply side. Okay, the demand side uncertainties, you know, that is dictated by the market. A lot of times, companies can't do much about it. You know, you can influence demand here and there by promotions and, you know, those sort of things. But the major part of, you know, the reason we carry safety stock is because of the supply uncertainty also. So there it depends on, you know, how much does the lead time vary, how long is the lead time. So in terms of that, nearshoring and things like that will enable you to reduce inventories. But the thing about this is this, you know, like Tim said, you know, carrying inventory is very expensive. So you might have a, you know, 99% customer service level. You might have a 95% customer service level, but the, you know, extra 4% service level that you're providing, if it costs a lot more than, you know, if basically the revenue that comes out of that is less than, you know, the cost of carrying that extra inventory, it's really no point doing that. Okay, so more than that, I think what we probably will see in the near future, in the near term, would be what Brian said, you know, diversifying, you know, vendors, diversifying the suppliers so that, you know, you basically can ramp one when one is going down and so on and so forth, and match that supply and demand a little better and carry a little less inventory.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the last thing, Stephanie, I too, I mean, and I agree with Robbie and Tim, you know, again, not knowing your company's, you know, customer service policies and that, and what service levels are expected, right? Not all items, not all customers are equal. So if, you know, I would tell you, I would always take this time, right, to shore up, and maybe it is carrying a little bit more safety stock on the things that are never out of stock, you know, in the way that we would look at the world. But I think there's other items, right, that may be, you know, B-level items, C-level items, et cetera, right, where you should really take with a fine-tooth comb, start thinking about how you reduce that. And I think the other part of this too is, you know, remember the cost of that inventory is a shared expense, or should be a shared expense between supplier and customer. So the cost of a supplier may be carrying the extra inventory, if you will, right? Or at least sharing in that risk, maybe also another strategy to think about, right? Because on their side of it, it actually may be a little bit cheaper for them to carry as opposed to you.
Or extend
Collaboration,
payment
yeah.
terms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Very
Thank
good
you for
point.
that.
Yeah, very good point.
Thank you for the questions. In deference of time, we're nearing 1 o'clock soon. I just wanted to move forward a little bit and wrap up here. But thanks for the discussion. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our program, if you want to, and like what it takes to the question the student had about coming in. So first of all, our program is one of the first and longest running programs of its kind in the Chicagoland area. So there's a vast array of alumni associated with the program, which is always beneficial for you. It's offered in our EU Flex format. What that means is all the classes are offered either online or on campus, or a combination of both. So it's very flexible to meet your needs. If you're traveling 1 week for work or have family obligations, you can plug in via Zoom, and then the following week you can come to campus. So the flexibility is there for you. It only takes 21 months to complete the degree, so just short of 2 years. We just had an event on campus last week where our students that are graduating came in to pick up their cap and gowns. I ran into a couple of students that I helped through the admission process about 2 years ago, and now they're graduating. And I said, my God, how quickly the time went. So once you start, you know how fast time goes. Before you know it, you'll be finished and earning that master's degree. There's a link there for you to learn more information and to request to submit your application. Once you submit your application, then I'll be there to assist you through the admission process. So this is what it takes once you submit the application, and a link is there for that. We would need a copy of a current resume, a statement of purpose from you, 3 letters of recommendation, all of your undergraduate official transcripts, and then you would have a short interview with Dr. Robbie. After we get all that from you, we would have an admission decision for you, usually within 1 to 2 weeks.
And the application deadline for our fall semester is August 15th. So keep that in mind if you're interested in joining us this fall.
And then you wanted to mention about our open house as well?
Yes, we have an open house coming up in June, on Tuesday, June 27th. We'll have some mini sessions for you to learn more about the admission process, financial aid. We're looking to bring in some alumni and current students to talk about their experience here at Elmhurst, and we'd love to have you join us. So you can go at our website and find that graduate open house online, and you can RSVP. You can also reach out to one of us here on the graduate admission team. We'd be happy to get you that information, but we'd love to have you with us on campus in the evening, Tuesday, June 27th, from 5 to 7:30 p.m.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks again to the panelists. It was a great discussion. And as we stated earlier, the session is recorded. And so we're going to send it out to everybody as well. So thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.